So why don't you start and I'll just hop right in.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So first off, I do want to, and I don't think they're in the room, but I do want to thank Greg and Kathy and Tri-C Ghost Search for putting this event on. They always do such an amazing job with ParaPsyCon, and I've known them all the way back to when they were doing events up at St. Joe's in Lorraine. Always a fantastic event, so we thank them for that. And like Andrew was saying, 10 years ago this year, we met in Ohio, a little further south from here. But yeah, like you said, we were sitting right across from each other and we just connected. It was that moment that's like, I know this woman. And really, I swear you're my big sister from another life. It was just instant connection.
That's the only brother I ever had.
All those girls. That Roger.
I know.
And he was there too.
And he was there too, yes.
Yes. And but that's part of the wonderful things of this universe is the interconnectedness of it. We're talking about fan pages. I have what I call the Connected Universe portal, and it dives into all of these different interconnections of the universe. So myself to Andrea, us to you, all of us to planet Earth, Earth to the sun, to the rest of the solar system, to the galaxy, to the entire universe. Everything is interconnected. And when we talk about the interdimensionality of it, there's just more layers that, well, I mean, you've seen at the farmhouse there, all those experiences, the time slips and things like that. So those are the types of things that we're going to be talking about today, are these different types of connections and how we get to see this play out. And I love how you started things, that because we're all sharing these experiences together. Right. We're all in this, and one of the things that I enjoy doing when I tell my stories, I know some people out there have had similar experiences, and you realize, okay, I'm not alone in this. There are other people that have shared these types of experiences. And another big thing that we do, we're not just talking at a wall. We're passing on this information to you and to everybody else in hopes that that's carried on to the next generation, because we're not going to be on this plane of existence forever. So somebody has to pick up that mantle and carry it forward. So that's a big part of what we do.
Yeah, that's what I tell all the kids that come up to me. No pressure, but you have to save the world that we screwed up. Yeah. Okay? You were born to fix everything we screwed up. So just, So yeah, join me on the Buttercup Brigade. And it's a place where you can get in touch with me with relative ease if you have questions or concerns. And it's a great, soft, cushy place in cyberspace, much like Mike's. So you can do that, and also tell them about your show too.
Oh, well, you probably don't know the rabbit hole isn't around anymore.
Oh, no, because I've done it so many times.
Yeah, well, we had done a show at the rabbit hole, just closed down like a month and a half ago after 6 years. Andrea was on there so many times, probably our most featured guest. But I do have Connecting the Universe, which is, I was already running that anyway, but that one's still going, just getting busy.
Yeah, getting busy.
And you started a World Awakening.
I did. I started a World Awakening again. I used to do it years and years ago as a blog talk audio show with George R. Lopez, who's my co-host. He was my co-host and my co-author on a book called In a Flicker, which is available. You can get that online. I don't have any with me. I've sold out of all of my books. I'm taking orders, so if you need anything at all. But if you feel in particular right now, this is a very tumultuous time for all of us. Anybody that's not tuned in and tapped into what's going on in the world is maybe living in oblivion and happy blissful ignorance. But anybody that's paying attention is feeling what's happening, and what is happening is something that I have been lecturing about for the last 10, 12 years, which is what I call the paradigm shift. I also refer to it frequently as holy shift. And, so I guess the most important thing to tell you is that all of this is happening for a reason. The good, the bad, the ugly, the war crimes, the this, the that, the everything, the COVID, the everything is all happening for a reason. And it is to fracture us, to shake us and wake us up, and to open us, our hearts. One of the things that I talk about so much on Soul School, I started a new show on KGRA on Monday nights called Soul School Sojourn. And I think my attitude is that we're in soul school here. We've been plunged into this three-dimensional 5D realm of 5-sensory realm of what we think of as reality. And it's really not our reality. But we're plunged here in this life to learn lessons. And what sucks about soul school is that the test always precedes the lesson. So we have to go through this tumult and this pain and this torture. And as Leonard Cohen, the great poet, once wrote, there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. That's how. And I don't mean to be emotional, although you know it's typical of me. But this has been very painful for anyone that's paying attention. And the world is kind of hovering on the precipice, and a maniac with like the most nukes on the planet is threatening to use them. And it's a scary time. My mother always said, fear the living, not the dead. And now I understand what she meant. But I will tell you, the most fascinating thing that ever happened at the farmhouse, some people think of it as the Conjuring House. It's not the Conjuring House. The Conjuring House is an old farmhouse in North Carolina that James Wan used to film the movie because he was scared shitless to come to Rhode Island. He wouldn't even step foot in the state, let alone on the property. And so they chose a house in Wilmington, North Carolina, and then he sent a crew of guys up into the trees to remove all the Spanish moss because there's no Spanish moss in Rhode Island. You know, that was an experience, but he read my books and he's like, oh hell no, we cannot tell this story because people will run screaming out of the theater. What's the point of making a film if nobody stays to watch it till the end? Well, I don't think of our story as a horror story, and I've talked about this with you a lot.
Absolutely.
It is a love story that has kind of a wicked supernatural twist, but it's about enlightenment and human illumination and knowing that spirit exists. For me, it's not wishful thinking. It's not a matter of faith or a belief system. I know there is something beyond our mortal existence. And at a time when we're losing well over 1 million people just in this country to this horrible novel coronavirus, and we either have lost someone that we love or we know someone who has lost someone that they love, this is the most important time for us to delve deeply into the subject matter because we need to know they're not really gone. They're not. How many of you have been touched by spirit? How many of you know there is something else, something beyond us? Yes, yes. It changes your life forever, doesn't it? You're never the same again. And before I let Mike go of, as I know what he's about to say, I have to tell you the one thing about our story, that it was the most profound, poignant thing that happened at the farmhouse. And it wasn't the seance that was foisted upon us by Ed and Lorraine Warren telling my father that if he loved my mother, he would allow that to happen. Lorraine's just really lucky that she was a woman when she said those words because he was ready to leap. He was so angry. And even though it wasn't in the film that my father kicked them and their entourage out of the house that night, using words that to that night I had never heard before in my life, because that's how livid he was, my mother almost paid with her life for a seance that went so terribly wrong. The woman who was there as the medium to conduct it conjured the spirits and opened wide the doors to the netherworld. and what came in was so ugly and so evil that it even hushed the spirits and terrified them in the house. And they didn't come back for over 2 months that we had anything happen. But this is where the healing occurred, and this is the most important story of all. I had to take over being mom. I was 15 years old, and I had come home from school, and I had fed my sisters, helped them with their homework, got them off to bed. And as I was sitting on the sofa that night, I know I've told you this.
Oh, I love this story. And I want you to tell it.
My mom came out of her room and she had been sleeping for hours and hours. She was wasting away. It was about 2 months after the seance had occurred. She had sustained a massive head injury, a concussion from that event. And she was not thriving. She was not doing well. She was trying to live on coffee and cigarettes. It was awful. It was awful watching your mother, this vibrant, vital, beautiful young woman, just shrinking away. And this is what changed everything, everything. She came out of her room and she said, "What did you make the girls for dinner?" And I said, "I made a pot of beef stew." And she said, "I'm hungry." And I was like, "Oh yes, thank you, I'm so glad." And so I said, "What can I get you, Mom? You know, what can I get?" And I had a fire going in the fireplace. It was October, and so it was cold already in Rhode Island, and I had a fire going, and she was standing in front of them, on the hearthstone in front of the fire, and she said, "I want a bowl of beef stew, and could you make a short pot of coffee?" And I said, "Mom, it's almost 11 at night." And she's like, "But it's the nectar of the gods." And I was like, "Okay, I'll make you a short pot of coffee." Now keep in mind, there was no such thing as Mr. Coffee machines. I had a Farberware percolator to work with. There was no such thing as a microwave, so I had to warm up the stew on the stove. So the house is very long. I walked all the way from the living room into the kitchen, into the pantry, got the stew out, started warming it on the stove, made her a short pot of coffee. In the interim, in the 10 to 15 minutes that I was gone, walking through a house that was completely shut down and dark, my mom reached into the wood box and threw a log on the fire, and as she was placing the screen back in front of it, she heard laughter over her shoulder. And she turned and she looked into our dining room, and there was a whole family having dinner, and the mother was cooking stew over a fireplace that had been closed for more than 100 years. And all the furniture was different, and there was a long hand-hewn oak table, and there was the mother and 2 children and 2 men sitting on the other side, and it had to have been prior to the 1800s, because they were using pewter dishware in steins, which was later outlawed because of the lead content. And the 2 gentlemen that were sitting there, one turned and he looked into the parlor and he saw my mother, and he nudged the man beside him and pointed her out, and she was the ghost. He was looking into the future at the same time that she was simultaneously witnessing what was happening in the past. And I don't know if what triggered that was maybe the stew, you know, because sometimes the weird synchronicities that would occur, or what that was. But when I came back through that room, they all disappeared. I came right back through, and there's my mother standing on the hearthstone, smiling from ear to ear. And I put the food down in front of the coffee table and let her sit, and she told me what she had just seen. And she devoured her food as she was telling me what she had just witnessed. And she said, "I get it now. I understand. This makes sense to me now. We live in a portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse." You know, we're living in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and that's why we never knew if we were going to be in the 20th century, the 19th, the 18th, the 17th century. We never knew what was coming next in the house, but what we learned is that all of it is energy, all of it is consciousness, and all of it is interconnected. Take it away. Thank you for indulging me. I think that was important
How do you
to tell
follow up with this? We're done. No, and I love that story. It's absolutely fascinating. And when you first told it to me, it's like light bulbs went off. Because, you know, for years I've been dabbling around with a concept that I call stacked time theory. The idea that all time is concurrent, past, present, future. It's all happening at the same time. And that was just absolute proof of it. There's a lot of different versions of it. Like you can research on Einstein and his space-time continuum kind of talked about the same thing. Again, we don't know what the catalyst is.
We don't.
Yeah, and some of these ghosts that we may even experience here at Ohio State Reformatory, those may actually be, you know, a time slip, you know, some observation. And you know, you think of the movie like, you know, The Others or something like that, that kind of blows your mind of, oh, they were actually the ghosts. And I think this is happening a lot more often
than we realize.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I finally went to the farmhouse a year and a half ago for my docuseries, The Shadow Mission, which you were part of.
Yeah,
thank you so much. I was there with the Johnson brothers, Carl and Keith, and they were, you know, kind of giving me the run of the house and, you know, telling their part of the story and the shadow smoke that Carl experienced and what have you, Keith's experience with the window. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting observations that I made about the house was the well room.
Yes.
It's an open well, still has water in it, and the construction of the room is limestone and granite. And this is right below that parlor where your mother had her experience. And
the bedroom where they had the major, because through those two doors was their bedroom, it's now the library. But
which is now the library, but it's right there.
Yep.
So the dining room's right there, and then right above that are your bedrooms where you had so many different experiences. And so looking at that construction, it was, you know, light bulbs are going off for me. It's like, wait a minute, I've seen stuff like this out in ancient Egypt. You know, you have a water source, you have limestone and granite, they were tapping into that earth energy. We know there's earth energy there on that property. It's all over.
All over.
But that was like a little power plant that harnessed all of that and sent it right through the roof. So these are things that we look for while we're researching and investigating. You have these fantastic experiences like this that let you know there are other things out there, there are other dimensions that we don't normally see, but every once in a while we get a glimpse of it. We just knew what the catalyst was, maybe we could, you know, become time travelers.
Yeah. Well, we're working on that.
We're working on that.
We are. Well, I'll tell you, I had a very interesting experience. I was there last week. I think it was last week. Oh my God. I think it was last week. And I was finishing a documentary that I'm working on, actually about extraterrestrials. But then we started filming another documentary with my producer while we were there. We kind of all, you know, crammed it all together. And I'm like, it's up to you to edit it the way you want. I'll just be here. And something happened to me at the farm last week that has never happened to me before. We lived there for 10 years. And I had an experience that I had told you about when I was 17. Of coming home from college because the squeaky wheel does get the grease, and I whined enough to get my father to fly me home like 4 weeks after I went out to college in Pittsburgh so I could spend my birthday with my family, because I missed my family and I missed the spirits and I just missed the farm so much. And I had a roommate from hell. When I would have swapped her for Bathsheba in a heartbeat. And so I came home, Dad picked me up at TF Green Airport in Providence, and we drove home, and it was already cold. It was my birthday's October 10th, so it's always falling on the Columbus Day weekend. And so I went upstairs, I found out that my sister Cindy had already taken my room over completely. And so apparently I would be sharing a room from that point on. And the reason that she did that was because she was the one that kept hearing the voices in her room, which was the middle room, that said to her over and over, there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. Well, you know, we didn't know where or what. They have since discovered anomalies down by the stone wall with the earth-penetrating radar. But in the state of Rhode Island, you are not allowed legally to exhume anything. And so we might not ever know if those were the 7 dead soldiers, but this house, as it stands now, was completed in 1736, 40 years before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It went through the Revolutionary War, it went through the Dorr Rebellion, it went through the King Philip's War, it went through the Civil War. It was used, the basement, the cellar, was used as a place to hide people who were heading toward Canada on the Underground Railroad, because the Arnolds were Quakers, they were abolitionists, and so it was used. I mean, the history of this house, and we'll never know the whole history, but what we do know is so utterly fascinating. So I'm sitting there in a room full of investigators. Ken DaCosta was there, some other people, and you know, you trying out all their new equipment. I can't touch any gizmos or gadgets because I have a reverse polarity. I suck the energy out of every battery. I have a beautiful watch. It doesn't work. It doesn't. I mean, my father puts a new battery in it every year and it works for 15 minutes and then it's just jewelry. And it's because there's something about my energy and it just sucks it out. Well, that night, I felt myself kind of vibrating a little bit. It was really strange, you know, and I'm sitting on the sofa and Ken's talking to the spirits in the house saying, you know, we're here in, you know, peaceful reverence and respect for you, and we just want to make contact. And I was just sitting there and I'm like, Ken, this spirit's standing on the hearthstone. And it was the same spirit that I had seen that weekend when I came home. And everybody in the family saw her, but I was the only one that saw her face. And the whole side of my body went cold. I was just standing in front of the fireplace trying to warm up after that long flight. And my family was sitting in the dining room and they were getting ready to have dinner. I said, I'll be right there, I just want to warm up. And I remember I was wearing brown corduroy pants and I'm thinking, my last conscious thought was, I'm standing too close to the fire. You know, why am I not warm? And then I turned and there she was, this far away from me. And she was turned sideways, staring at me. And her face, I was 17, her face was the spitting image of me as I am now, except with lots more gray hair in a bun on her head. And she was wearing clothing from probably around the 1840s, 1850s, with the big leg of mutton sleeves and the pearls and full-length dress. And she smiled at me, and she was a mirror image of reflection of how I am now. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God. You know, like, is reincarnation real? You know, do I come from here and was drawn back? My mother always said she knew that they bought that farm for me and she didn't know why. As I'm sitting there last week in the house, I suddenly could see through her eyes, standing on the hearthstone, not sitting on the sofa, but I could see me sitting on the sofa from behind. And as she and I are looking into the room, what she saw was a room full of ghosts. And I told her, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, come in. And then for the next 15 or 20 minutes, every single machine that we had in that house went nuts. All of them were off the charts, all the pretty colors flashing and beeping, and they filmed it, and they'll never even be able to use all the film that they got from that night and cram it into a movie. And That was the first time that I ever actually merged and connected with her. And I haven't told anyone. You are the first people to hear this. Mike hadn't heard this story yet. Yeah. But I thought, this is something that we need to discuss, because this is empirical evidence of the existence of a fourth dimension where we can actually communicate and connect. And for just a moment or two, I was with her and she was with me, and we were one. And she came into the room and she stayed with us and she communicated with us. And it was beautiful. Be not afraid. There is nothing to fear. There is nothing to fear. This is phenomenal in every conceivable sense of that word.
Yeah, reincarnation, absolutely believe. And you know, people are drawn to locations.
Yes.
You know, I've always wanted to go to, apparently that house was a draw for you. Some people say, you know, I always wanted to go to Ireland. I always wanted to go to Scotland, or you know, some of these other locations across the world. Well, what's the draw? Why is it that your soul is calling you to go back there? And then
it's an ancient calling.
It's an ancient calling, and you get back there, and you're like, this feels like home. Well, it probably was to you at some point in time. I've found this kind of humorous lately, and just to let you all know, you are all on the, really on the precipice of all of this type of research.
Yes.
Our sciences, they're coming out, if you watch some of the better news.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
You're seeing these scientific reports come out saying, hey, we're proving that, consciousness, after we pass away, actually leaves the body and goes off somewhere into the cosmos. And it's like, oh, really? We've been talking about this for thousands of years. The ancients knew this long time ago.
Science is catching up. It's the merging of science and spirituality, part of the paradigm shift.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're also seeing some of these reports come out of Antarctica. We're talking about other dimensions. Well, you see these reports coming out of Antarctica with the Anita Project and the Ice Cube Project, where they are finding evidence of a parallel universe running in reverse time. That's another dimension. What that would look like where in reverse time would be pretty interesting.
If I can age in reverse, I'm all in with that.
But we're seeing evidence of this finally through the sciences. But this is stuff that we've known about since ancient times. It's what the ancients are trying to tap into when they built their stone circles or the pyramids and their ancient temples. They were trying to enter into altered states of consciousness, or for healing purposes, stargates, portals, these sorts of things. They had this knowledge and were utilizing it, and we lost that over time for a variety of different reasons. Global cataclysms. You had some barbaric tribes that would come in and knock out the different religions, or you would have a religion come in and just be like, well, those are heathens, and we'll wipe them away. Yeah, that sort of thing, which is a shame. I do want to share with you a story of my own, and you can kind of ask yourselves what this meant. So some of you are familiar with my story of my first shadow person incident. Tom McNicholas and Nick Maleo there have heard this 1,000 times. But when I was 8 years old, living in a house in Westfield, Massachusetts, woke up in the middle of the night. There's this tall, dark figure standing in the corner of my bedroom. I was scared to death. I was just 8 years old. I thought an intruder had broken into the house and was about to kill me. That's what you think at that age. I had no idea about shadow people and shadow entities, that sort of thing. But it did have an interaction with me. It approached my bed. I'm trying to scream. My mouth opens up. Nothing's coming out because I'm just too terrified. It leans over my bed. I'm staring up at this blank black face. There's no eyes, no nose, nothing. Then takes me by the wrist, crosses my arms across my body, runs off down the hall, of all places into a closet. I don't know why, but there it went. I finally found my voice, found my legs, ran off to my parents' bedroom, yelling and screaming about what had happened. They're trying to console me, calm me down, trying to tell me I just had a bad dream, but I knew this wasn't a bad dream. I've been awake for this whole thing. It's like one of those first experiences that kind of set me off on this whole path that I am today. Well, over the years, as I've told this story, I've had different people suggest things like, well, other than the terrifying aspect of, a shadow person interacted with you, some more thoughtful people suggested, well, maybe it thought that you were actually dead, and trying to put you into some sort of burial pose like ancient Egypt with crook and flail, that sort of thing. It's like, well, that's interesting. And a couple different people suggested that. I kind of ran with that for a little while. Well, just about a year ago, I went through a hypnotic regression. Her name was Ariana Corsedo, trained under Dolores Cannon. She's very, very good. And we did past life regression, which was extremely interesting. But then I wanted her to examine that moment with the shadow entity. What actually happened, rather than just trying to theorize what in the world happened. So we went back to that moment during this hypnosis session. And what was really, really interesting about this moment is instead of me being back of myself in my 8-year-old body, I was actually in the position of the shadow entity, standing in the corner, looking down on my 8-year-old self. And it was really hard to watch because it's like, here's this little boy, and he's scared, and his mouth is opening up, and he can't scream. And I actually felt the emotions of the shadow entity. And it wasn't there actually to try to scare me. It didn't even realize at first that I could see it. It was there to watch and observe. Its purpose there, as we discovered through the session, as Ariana kept asking questions, its purpose there was to study humanity. It wasn't there for anything nefarious. It was just to learn and study humans. And they had happened to pick my room that night to study a little boy. Didn't realize that I could see it until all of a sudden, here I am trying to scream. What the shadow entity did, and I got to see it from this different perspective, when it crossed my arms like that, because it felt bad for having scared me, it was actually trying to give me a self-hug. And I got to see this hand pat my wrists. And then it ran off down the hall to get out of there. One of the questions that Ariana asked as we were interacting with this being was, of course we asked, why were you there? It was to study humanity. The other question was, where are you from? And the answer, the response was, I'm from another space. So then Ariana asked, you mean another dimension? And the response was, well, you may call it another dimension, but really it's another space. Which is really cryptic, but it shows us that even with our ideas that we have right now as humans with different dimensions and what have you, that's really just the tip of the iceberg, that there's something far deeper going on here that we really don't understand yet. And we are ahead of the game here because we're more open-minded to this. Science is behind the 8 ball because they're just like,
catch up.
Yeah, they're just trying to catch up. So, I throw the question out to you guys. Dimension, space, what do you guys think it is? What do you think it is, Annie?
Well, I think that the safest assumption that any of us can make is that we know nothing compared to what there is to know. But the thing that's so wonderful about humanity is our curiosity and our fascination and our wanting to know more. Because it is, ask anybody that you know that's a blithering idiot, admitting you all know someone. Head in the sand, I know nothing, I hear nothing, I see nothing, and because and why? And who can blame them? It's easier to live that way. We're the seekers and the seers. We're the ones that are willing to take the risks and to forward the momentum of this field. And the most important thing is we're willing to come away with more questions than answers. All of us are, or you would not be here. None of you stumbled into this lecture or this building by accident today. You were drawn here with purpose and reason to forward and expand your own consciousness. But the real beauty of it is that you're willing to come away with more questions than answers, and you're not afraid to hear, I don't know. I can't tell you what I saw the day that we moved into that farm. I saw a full body apparition who looked as solid as you. Manny. And here's the interesting thing. I walked past him and I said, "Good morning, sir." My sister Nancy saw him evaporate into thin air. Now, Nancy called him Manny because she was just a kid and he was a man, and it's, you know, not real creative when it comes to naming things, except her pets. That's different. But we have mutual friends. Jason Hawes has a daughter named Satori, and her boyfriend is Cody Despiens. And over the last few years, they have developed an ability that they stumbled upon. They just stumbled upon it. Being, when they embrace together, when they hold each other's arms or hands, they become a conduit for spirit. They're literally tapping into the field of unified consciousness. And the spirits use them to communicate with us. And they literally tap out according, like this, the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They can build sentences of these entities that are no longer earthbound. They are spirit, but they use them to talk to others. Now, I've been in their presence while this happens, and I lived long enough to see it. It shook me to my roots. It's so incredible. They are the future of the paranormal. They are rendering spirit box obsolete. It is direct conscious contact. And they went to the farm last autumn. I wasn't there, but they told me what happened. And a man came through and he identified himself as Joseph. And everybody in the room who had read all of my books are looking at each other like, "Do you remember Annie writing about Joseph?" I hadn't. We thought that that spirit was probably Johnny Arnold, who had consumed horse liniment because it was a quick way to get alcohol at a time when it was not available. And it ate a hole in his stomach and he died in the house. I don't believe for a moment that it was suicide. I think it was an accidental death. But he was the right age, the right time, according to the death certificate that my mother procured from the town records office. So after she started doing research on the house, we kind of assumed that that was Johnny Arnold. Well, this entity comes through. This spirit says, "I'm Joseph. Nancy used to call me Manny." Oh. Full sentence written down on a piece of paper that I have from Jennifer Heinsohn. Nancy used to call me Manny. 50 years after we moved to that farm, we're still learning about the spirits in that house. We know nothing compared to what there is to know. And it is incredibly brave, truly courageous. This field wouldn't exist if it weren't for people like you that had the wherewithal to dare to question. And just like the man that plants a seed, knowing as an old man that he's planted a tree that he will never sit under in this life. That's faith, that's belief, and that is what drives us. But knowledge is the thing that drives us most, the quest and the thirst for knowledge. And that is the true beauty of being human. We're all in this together, kids. We're all in this together.
So, what you learn on your adventures, on your travels, pass it on to the next person. Be sure to share it. You know, that was something that was so hard years ago.
Yes.
That you were not able to share it. You know, you could find yourself in a straitjacket and tossed away somewhere. Yes. But we are
in a place like this.
In a place like this, yeah. Yeah. We are in an amazing moment of time, and hopefully it will last for a while, in which the world is opening up and people are coming forth, sharing their stories, and more people in the world are accepting of those stories because they've had experiences too. Mm-hmm. We're all in this together. We're all connected, so share away.
Yes, and know this, that when you have the courage to share your own experiences the same way that Mike and I have done. Both of us have experienced the same thing, and that is being written to by thousands of our readers, saying basically the same thing. You liberated me to tell my own story.
Yeah, that's some of the most humbling moments when somebody comes forth and says, I'm so happy that you shared this because you know, I thought I was crazy, or the whole liberation moment of it. You know, I've had people told me that they've read something and they cried because they finally realized I'm not alone in all this.
Right.
We're all in this together.
Yeah, that whole feeling of isolation just dissolves instantly, and really all you're doing is handing them the key that they relinquished to you in listening to you, and you just hand it back. You know, we put ourselves in this three-dimensional, five-sensory realm. It is not the truth of our existence. We live in space. We live in a multi-dimensional universe, and everything is interwoven into this vast, complex tapestry of life, and each and every one of us is a filament that completes the artwork of existence.
I don't know better to sum it up other than
it's just
I mean, just feel the environment around you. I think that's something that's kind of been lost over time. That is what the ancients knew. I mean, you think about that story about Satori and Cody is amazing. That they were just simply using their energy. You know, we have all kinds of devices and gadgets these days, which are wonderful. But you think about what the ancients used to use, and it was stone and dirt and their own energy. Park Math Institute has a lot of great research on energy and how you connect with different people, even pets. They have research on a person to their horse. It's amazing stuff, and that's what the ancients used back then. So a lot of these shamans that are doing their chants and their ceremonies, they understand a lot better of what's going on than a lot of our sciences actually. And in music, sound and vibration, it's all energy, resonance, vibration, frequency. That's what the world is. You take all these objects around us. We have a whole building. They're on a atomic level. Everything is vibrating. Just listen for it. It's out there.
But in my opinion, what holds the molecules and the atoms together in this universe is love. And it is our superpower. It is. So we must love each other powerfully and ignore the differences and share the sameness of what we are and who we are, because that alone has the ability to elevate humanity to a higher level of consciousness. Be good, be kind, be compassionate. That's how we lived in that house for 10 years. We finally understood that we were living in shared space, that it was their house first, and to dwell among the dead is the most enlightening experience that anyone can ever have. And so for that, I am grateful to have been raised in the house of darkness and the house of light, because it was, that's right.
Just on a different plane of existence.
And it's all one thing. It's all one thing. All of it.
Someone up there. Do we have, how much time do we have left?
So you guys have about, you have 5 minutes left.
5 minutes.
Yeah, cool.
It goes so fast.
Yeah.
I just want to, to just take a moment to encourage all of you and to not feel alone. You can reach out to Mike, you can reach out to
Always
me,
available.
and innumerable people that are in this field. Most of the people that work in this field, they checked their ego at the door a long time ago. Anybody that ever tells you they're the world's leading expert on the paranormal, turn and run in the opposite direction. Because if he's not, and I'm not, and our family's not, there's nobody on this planet that has the answers that you're seeking. I truly do believe that we find them within ourselves. that the inner light is the experience of divine consciousness and prime creator and all of that. I think that whatever created all of us in the universe uses us as a way to see its own creation. And it really is an absolutely beautiful thing. It is, Einstein wrote about the merging of science and spirituality, so did Tesla, so did Anka, this is all coming full circle now. And so do your homework, reach out to people in the know. To the extent that we are able to share, we always will. We are always open to all of you. And I'll let Michael close, but I just have to tell you, I'm so grateful to know all of you and to love all of you, and that you came to join us here today at this phenomenal event. It does mean the world to me. I came a long way to meet a lot of you. And it is my pleasure and my privilege, and I am humbled by your existence in my world today.
I don't know how much better I can sum it up to what Andy just said. She keeps trying to get me to follow her. It's like, what are you doing? But no, it's been a real honor to finally be able to share this stage with you and be able to talk to all of you. You know, you guys have those open minds that are seeking these answers. And you're right, it always leads to more questions. But that's part of the adventure, and I think we all have to have an adventurous spirit when we're doing this type of research, because we're going to find ourselves in locations that you would never have expected, whether it's a physical building like this or in a spiritual place within ourselves or with other people in our lives. Like you said, it's about love.
It is.
And I think one of the biggest things that we're down here to do, sharing with one another and loving on one another as well, and helping each other along in this, whether it's the day-to-day life or the knowledge that we're sharing today. We're all here to help each other. So, I can't say anything else other than that.